Therapist was secretly my stalker, used our sessions to learn my schedule, broke into my house nightly for months. The panic attack started when I was 25, triggered by a toxic relationship that had left me questioning everything about myself. My ex-boyfriend had spent 2 years systematically destroying my self-confidence through subtle manipulation and emotional abuse. When I finally found the courage to leave him, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. The anxiety hit me like a freight train. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, convinced something terrible was about to happen. During the day, I'd have episodes where I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't function. Simple tasks like grocery shopping became overwhelming ordeals. You need professional help, my best friend told me after finding me hyperventilating in my apartment bathroom for the 3rd time that week. This isn't something you can handle alone. I'd always been skeptical of therapy, but I was desperate. Sarah recommended Dr. Wells, a psychologist who specialized in trauma and anxiety disorders. His office was in an upscale medical building downtown, and his credentials were impressive. Harvard-educated, published researcher, 20 years of experience. He helped my cousin after her divorce, Sarah assured me. She said he was amazing, really understood what she was going through. Dr. Wells looked exactly like what I'd expected from a therapist. Late 40s, graying hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a calm, authoritative presence. His office was warm and inviting, filled with books and soft lighting that immediately put me at ease. "Tell me what brings you here today, Emma," he said during our first session, his voice gentle and reassuring. I explained about my ex, about the panic attacks, about feeling like I was losing control of my life. Dr. Wells listened intently, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. "Anxiety often stems from a sense of powerlessness," he explained. "Your relationship taught your nervous system to be hypervigilant, always scanning for threats. We can retrain those responses through cognitive behavioral therapy and gradual exposure exercises." He seemed knowledgeable and compassionate. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful that I could get better. Our sessions were scheduled for every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Dr. Wells had a way of making me feel heard and understood that I'd never experienced before. He normalized my reactions to the abuse and helped me see that my anxiety was a natural response to trauma. "You're not broken, Emma," he would remind me. "You're healing from wounds that someone else inflicted. That takes time and patience with yourself." But instead of getting better, I started feeling worse. The panic attacks increased in frequency and intensity. I began having vivid nightmares about being watched and followed. During the day, I felt constantly on edge, like someone was observing me even when I was alone. "This is normal," Dr. Wells assured me when I mentioned these symptoms during our 4th session. "Sometimes things get worse before they get better. We're bringing unconscious fears to the surface so we can address them." I trusted his expertise and pushed through the discomfort. But the feeling of being watched intensified. I started checking my locks obsessively before bed, convinced someone had been in my apartment while I was gone. "I feel like someone's been in my house," I told him during our 6th session. "I know it sounds paranoid, but things seem different when I get home. Like someone moved my coffee mug or adjusted my curtains." Dr. Wells leaned forward with concern. "Have you considered that this might be related to your trauma response? Sometimes our minds play tricks on us when we're hypervigilant." He was right, of course. I was probably just being paranoid. But the feeling persisted and grew stronger with each passing week. During our sessions, Dr. Wells asked detailed questions about my daily routine. What time did I leave for work? When did I usually get home? Did I have any evening activities or weekend plans? He framed these questions as part of understanding my lifestyle and stress levels. "Structure and routine are important for anxiety management," he explained. "I like to understand my patients' daily patterns so I can suggest coping strategies that fit into their actual lives." It made sense, so I answered his questions thoroughly. I told him about my morning jogs at 6 a.m., my grocery shopping on Sunday afternoons, my weekly dinner with Sarah on Fridays. I mentioned that I worked late on Thursdays and that I usually went to bed early on weeknights. "You have good instincts for self-care," he praised. "Maintaining consistent sleep and exercise habits will help stabilize your mood." But the more I shared about my routine, the worse my symptoms became. I started finding small things out of place in my apartment. A book moved slightly on my nightstand, my bedroom door open when I was sure I'd closed it, my mail sorted differently than I'd left it. "Maybe you should consider medication," Dr. Wells suggested during our 8th session. "Your anxiety seems to be manifesting in paranoid thoughts. A low-dose antipsychotic might help quiet some of these intrusive fears." I was reluctant to take medication, but my life was becoming unmanageable. I agreed to try a small dose of the medication he recommended. The pills made me drowsy and foggy-headed. I started sleeping more deeply than usual, often not waking up until my alarm had been going off for several minutes. Dr. Wells assured me this was normal as my body adjusted to the medication. "Deep sleep is healing," he said. "Your nervous system needs that rest to recover from the trauma." But something felt wrong. The deeper I slept, the more convinced I became that someone was entering my apartment at night. I'd wake up feeling disoriented, sometimes finding things in different places than I remembered leaving them. "I think someone's coming into my apartment while I sleep," I told Dr. Wells during our 10th session. "I know it sounds crazy, but I'm finding evidence." "What kind of evidence?" he asked, his pen poised over his notepad. "Small things. My kitchen chair chair pushed in differently. My bathroom door closed when I leave it open. My laptop moved on my desk. Dr. Wells nodded thoughtfully. These could be signs that your medication dose needs adjustment. Sometimes antipsychotics can cause confusion about time and memory. You might be moving these things yourself and not remembering. That made me doubt myself even more. Was I losing my mind? Was the medication affecting my memory? I started questioning everything I thought I remembered. Maybe we should increase your sessions to twice a week, Dr. Wells suggested. I'm concerned about your deteriorating mental state. I agreed, desperate for help. We added Thursday evening appointments at 6 p.m. to complement my Tuesday afternoon sessions. But the Thursday sessions felt different somehow. Dr. Wells seemed more interested in my personal life than my therapeutic progress. He asked about my relationships, my past dating experiences, my living situation. Do you live alone? He asked during one Thursday session. Yes, just me in a one-bedroom apartment. Do you feel safe living alone? Any concerns about security? Not really. It's a secure building with good locks. That's good. What about your neighbors? Do you know them well? The questions felt invasive, but I assumed they were related to my anxiety about being watched. Maybe he was trying to help me feel more secure in my living situation. Around this time, I started noticing a car parked on my street that seemed familiar. A dark blue sedan that appeared to be there more often than coincidence would suggest. Sometimes I'd see it when I left for work, sometimes when I returned home. I keep seeing the same car on my street, I mentioned to Dr. Wells. It's probably nothing, but with all my anxiety about being watched, it's making me nervous. What kind of car is it like? He asked. A dark blue sedan. I can't see the license plate clearly from my window. Dr. Wells made a note. Have you considered that noticing patterns like this might be part of your hypervigilance? When we're anxious, we tend to focus on details that might normally escape our attention. He was probably right. I was looking for threats everywhere because my nervous system was stuck in fight or flight mode. But then Sarah noticed something that made me question everything. You look exhausted, she said during our Friday dinner. Are you sleeping okay? I've been sleeping really deeply, actually. Maybe too deeply. I feel groggy all the time. Sarah frowned. That's weird. Last week when I called you at 10 p.m., your phone went straight to voicemail. But when I called back an hour later, you answered and said you'd been asleep for hours. Your voice sounded strange, like you were drugged or something. I didn't remember Sarah calling me at 10 p.m. or talking to her later that night. The memory gap was unsettling, but I attributed it to the medication. Dr. Wells said the pills might affect my memory while my body adjusts, I explained. What kind of doctor prescribes medication that makes you forget entire conversations? Sarah asked, concerned. He's helping me work through trauma. Sometimes the healing process is uncomfortable. But Sarah's comment planted a seed of doubt. I started paying closer attention to my medication and its effects. The pills were small and white, with no identifying markings. When I looked up the medication Dr. Wells had prescribed, the images online showed tablets that looked completely different. These don't look like the pills you gave me, I said during our next session, showing him my phone. Dr. Wells barely glanced at the screen. Medications often look different depending on the manufacturer. Generic versions can vary in appearance. That explanation seemed reasonable, but something about his dismissive response bothered me. The next week, I decided to test something. Instead of taking the pill before bed as instructed, I pretended to swallow it, but actually hid it in my cheek until I could spit it out. That night, I slept lightly and woke up several times. Around 2 a.m., I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, the soft click of my front door closing. I lay perfectly still, my heart hammering as I listened. Footsteps moved quietly through my apartment. Someone was definitely inside. I wanted to scream, to call the police, to run, but I was frozen with terror, pretending to be asleep while someone moved around my home in the darkness. The footsteps approached my bedroom door, which I always left slightly open. Through my barely cracked eyelids, I saw a figure silhouetted in the doorway. Tall, wearing dark clothing, standing completely still as if watching me sleep. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the figure moved away. I heard more quiet sounds from my living room and kitchen, then the soft click of the front door again. I waited another hour before getting up to check my apartment. Nothing seemed to be missing, but several things had been moved. My laptop was open when I was sure I'd closed it. My bedroom curtains were adjusted differently. There was a coffee mug in my sink that I didn't remember using. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove straight to a locksmith. I had all my locks changed and installed a chain lock on my front door, but I didn't feel safe. Someone had a key to my apartment and they'd been coming inside while I slept. The smart thing would have been to call the police immediately, but I was terrified they wouldn't believe me, especially given my recent mental health struggles. Who would take seriously the claims of someone who is seeing a therapist for paranoid thoughts? Instead, I decided to gather evidence. I set up my phone to record video overnight, hidden where it wouldn't be easily spotted. The next night, I again pretended to take my medication. I lay in bed with my eyes closed, waiting and listening. Sure enough, around 2 a.m., I heard the front door. This time I was ready. I controlled my breathing and remained completely still as footsteps approached my bedroom. The intruder stood in my doorway for several minutes before moving through the rest of my apartment. When morning came, I checked my phone recording with shaking hands. The video was dark and grainy, but it clearly showed a figure moving through my apartment. When the person passed under the light from my kitchen window, window, I could make out some details. The intruder was tall and male, wearing a dark jacket and hat. But what I saw next made me nauseous with shock and disbelief. In one frame, when the person turned slightly toward my bedroom, I caught a glimpse of his profile. The shape of his nose, the line of his jaw, the way he moved, it looked familiar. It looked like Dr. Wells. I stared at the video for hours, replaying that one crucial frame. Was I seeing things? Was my paranoid mind creating patterns where none existed? But the more I looked, the more convinced I became. My therapist was breaking into my apartment. The realization was so overwhelming that I actually vomited. The person I'd trusted with my deepest fears and vulnerabilities, the person who was supposed to help me heal, had been violating my most private space for months. But I needed more proof. A grainy phone video wouldn't be enough to convince anyone, especially not the police. I needed something definitive. The next day, I called Dr. Wells's office to cancel my upcoming appointment. I'm feeling much better, I lied to his receptionist. I think I'm ready to take a break from therapy for a while. Dr. Wells likes to do termination sessions with his patients, the receptionist said. Would you like me to schedule one final appointment? No, that's okay. I'll call if I need anything. I hung up and immediately started planning. If Dr. Wells had been coming to my apartment regularly, he'd probably notice that I'd changed the locks. He might try to contact me or even approach me directly. I needed to be ready. I installed a security camera system that recorded to cloud storage. I set up motion sensors and door alarms. I bought pepper spray and kept it with me at all times. Then I waited. 2 days later, Dr. Wells called my cell phone. Emma, I'm concerned about you, he said when I answered. Canceling therapy abruptly can be dangerous when you're dealing with anxiety and paranoid thoughts. I'm doing much better, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I don't think I need therapy anymore. I'd really like to see you for one final session, just to make sure you're making this decision from a healthy place. I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. Emma, I know you've been struggling with paranoid ideation. Sometimes patients convince themselves they don't need help when they're actually getting worse. Please reconsider. The way he said paranoid ideation sent chills down my spine. He was already laying the groundwork to discredit me if I ever reported what he'd been doing. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up. That night, my security system triggered an alert at 1:47 a.m. Someone was trying to pick my new locks. I watched the live feed from my phone as a figure worked at my front door with lock-picking tools. When the person looked up toward the security camera, the infrared illumination clearly captured his face. It was definitely Dr. Wells. I called 911 immediately. Someone's trying to break into my apartment, I whispered into the phone. I have video footage. Please send officers right away. Are you in immediate danger? The dispatcher asked. Yes, he's at my front door right now trying to get in. By the time the police arrived, Dr. Wells was gone, but my security system had captured everything. Clear footage of him attempting to break into my apartment, including shots of his face and his license plate as he drove away. Do you know this person? Officer Martinez asked after reviewing the footage. He's my therapist, I said, and saw the skeptical look that crossed his face. Your therapist was trying to break into your apartment? I know how it sounds, but he's been doing this for months. I have more evidence. I showed them the video I'd taken of him inside my apartment, explained about the medication that made me sleep too deeply, detailed all the signs that someone had been entering my home. Why didn't you report this sooner? Officer Martinez asked. Because I thought I was going crazy. He convinced me that my concerns were just paranoid thoughts related to my anxiety disorder. The officers took my statement and collected copies of all my video evidence. They said they would investigate, but I could tell they were skeptical about the whole situation. Mental health patients sometimes develop fixations on their therapists, Officer Martinez explained gently. Are you sure you're interpreting these events correctly? Even with clear video evidence, they were questioning my credibility because I'd been seeing a therapist for anxiety. The investigation moved slowly. Dr. Wells was questioned but denied everything, claiming I was a delusional patient who'd developed an unhealthy obsession with him. She's been making increasingly paranoid accusations during our sessions, he told investigators. I've been trying to help her, but she's resistant to treatment and has been skipping appointments. He painted me as an unstable woman who couldn't distinguish reality from delusion. Without additional evidence, it was his word against mine. But I wasn't giving up. I started researching Dr. Wells more thoroughly, looking for any pattern of inappropriate behavior with other patients. What I found was disturbing. Over the past 5 years, 3 other women had filed complaints against him with the state licensing board. All had similar stories: feelings of being watched, items moved in their homes, mysterious gaps in memory after taking medication he'd prescribed. Each complaint had been dismissed due to insufficient evidence and the women's compromised mental state. I contacted these women and found that they'd all experienced the same escalating pattern. Dr. Wells would ask detailed questions about their routines, prescribe medication that made them sleep deeply, and gradually convince them that their concerns about being watched were symptoms of their mental illness. I thought I was losing my mind. one woman told me over the phone. He made me doubt everything I was experiencing. When I tried to report him, everyone assumed I was just a crazy patient with paranoid delusions. The pills he gave me weren't the medication he claimed, another woman said. I had them tested after I stopped seeing him. They contained sedatives that weren't on the label. Armed with this information, I went back to the police. The pattern of behavior across multiple patients was harder to dismiss than my individual case. Detective Sarah Kim was assigned to investigate the broader allegations against Dr. Wells. She took the case seriously and began interviewing his other patients. "We're finding a concerning pattern," she told me during one of our meetings. "At least 6 women have reported similar experiences, but none felt they would be believed because of their patient status." The investigation uncovered that Dr. Wells had been systematically targeting vulnerable women who were seeking therapy for anxiety and trauma. He would use their sessions to learn intimate details about their lives, then exploit that information to stalk and terrorize them. He chose victims who were already struggling with anxiety and paranoid thoughts, Detective Kim explained. When they reported feeling watched or stalked, he could dismiss their concerns as symptoms of their mental illness. The medication analysis was particularly damning. The pills Dr. Wells had been prescribing contained powerful sedatives that would cause deep sleep and memory problems. He'd been drugging his patients to ensure they wouldn't wake up during his nighttime visits. "This is one of the most calculated predatory schemes I've ever seen," Detective Kim said. He used his position as a therapist to gaslight his victims and make them doubt their own perceptions. Dr. Wells was arrested at his office on charges including breaking and entering, stalking, prescription fraud, and sexual misconduct. The investigation revealed that he'd been entering patients' homes for years, taking photographs while they slept, and stealing personal items as trophies. They found boxes of stolen belongings in his home, jewelry, clothing, photographs, and personal documents taken from dozens of women over the course of his career. Some of these items date back over a decade, Detective Kim told me. He's been doing this for a very long time. The most disturbing discovery was his detailed journals documenting his activities. He'd kept meticulous records of each victim, their schedules, their vulnerabilities, their medication responses, and his nighttime visits to their homes. My case was just one entry in hundreds of pages of predatory behavior. Patient E shows strong response to gaslighting techniques, one entry read. Successfully convinced her that surveillance concerns are paranoid ideation. Medication compliance excellent. Subject maintains deep sleep during visits. Reading his clinical descriptions of his abuse was nauseating. He'd turned stalking and psychological torture into a systematic study, treating his victims like lab rats in an experiment. The trial was a media sensation. Therapists stalked patients for years made headlines across the country. Dr. Wells' defense team tried to portray his victims as mentally unstable women with false memories, but the physical evidence was overwhelming. These women trusted Dr. Wells to help them heal from trauma, the prosecutor said during closing arguments. Instead, he used their vulnerabilities against them, creating new trauma while convincing them they were imagining the abuse. Dr. Wells was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to 25 years in prison. His medical license was revoked, and several of his victims filed civil lawsuits against him and the medical practice that employed him. But the damage he'd done couldn't be undone with a conviction. I struggled with severe trust issues after discovering the truth about Dr. Wells. The idea of seeking therapy again was terrifying. How could I trust another mental health professional after being so thoroughly betrayed? He weaponized therapy against you. My new therapist, Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, explained during one of our sessions, he used the therapeutic relationship to gain access to your vulnerabilities and then exploited them for his own gratification. Dr. Rodriguez specialized in treating victims of professional abuse and understood the unique trauma of being betrayed by a healthcare provider. Patients are supposed to be able to trust their therapist completely, she said. When that trust is violated, it can be more damaging than other forms of trauma because it attacks your ability to seek help. She was right. Even years later, I struggled with the fear that mental health professionals might be manipulating or judging me. I second-guessed every therapeutic intervention and questioned whether my symptoms were real or imagined. Dr. Wells trained you to doubt your own perceptions, Dr. Rodriguez reminded me. Part of healing from his abuse is learning to trust yourself again. The other victims and I formed a support group to help each other process what we'd experienced. Talking to women who'd been through identical abuse was both validating and heartbreaking. "I still check my locks obsessively," one woman shared. "I know he's in prison, but I can't shake the feeling that someone might be watching me. I have cameras everywhere in my house now," another added. "I need proof that I'm safe because I can't trust my own sense of security anymore." We'd all developed hypervigilance and trust issues that extended far beyond our experience with Dr. Wells. His abuse had taught us that the people we trusted most could be the ones who hurt us most deeply. The civil lawsuit took 3 years to resolve. Dr. Wells was ordered to pay damages to 12 victims, though most of us knew we'd never see that money. The real victory was the changes made to professional oversight and patient protection policies. New regulations require that therapy sessions be recorded recorded or monitored, Detective Kim explained, and there are stricter guidelines about prescribing medication and maintaining appropriate boundaries with patients. The case had exposed massive gaps in the system that was supposed to protect vulnerable patients from predatory professionals, but no amount of policy changes could give us back the years we'd lost to his abuse or restore our ability to trust completely. I eventually returned to work and built a relatively normal life, but I was forever changed by the experience. Simple things like medical appointments or meeting new people triggered anxiety about being manipulated or deceived. Recovery isn't about forgetting what happened, Dr. Rodriguez explained. It's about learning to live with the knowledge while rebuilding your sense of safety and trust. Some days were better than others. I had good relationships, a career I enjoyed, and hobbies that brought me joy. But I always carried the awareness that people aren't always who they seem to be, that trust is fragile, and that the very people who promise to help you can sometimes be the ones who hurt you most. The worst part wasn't even the stalking itself. It was the systematic way Dr. Wells had made me doubt my own reality. He'd convinced me that my fears were symptoms of mental illness, that my perceptions couldn't be trusted, that I was fundamentally broken. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious forms of abuse, Dr. Rodriguez explained. It doesn't just hurt you in the moment, it makes you question your ability to recognize danger in the future. 5 years after Dr. Wells's conviction, I received a letter from him in prison. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Emma, it read, I've had time to reflect on my actions and I want you to know that I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused. I was struggling with my own psychological issues and used my position inappropriately. I hope you've been able to heal and move forward with your life. The letter felt like one final manipulation, an attempt to reframe his systematic abuse as a momentary lapse in judgment caused by his own mental health struggles. I threw it away without responding. Dr. Wells had stolen something from me that could never be fully restored. My ability to trust completely, to feel safe in my own home, to believe that the people who promise to help will actually help. But I'd also gained something valuable through surviving his abuse. The knowledge that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, that I could trust my own perceptions even when others tried to convince me I was wrong, and that speaking up about abuse, even when it seems impossible to prove, can protect other people from becoming victims. The experience taught me that the question, when did you realize your therapist was making you worse, has an answer that's more complex than just recognizing ineffective treatment. Sometimes therapists make you worse because they're using their position to abuse you. Sometimes the very person who's supposed to help you heal is actually the one creating new trauma. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust yourself enough to recognize that what's happening to you isn't therapy, it's abuse disguised as treatment.